Hello.
Does that work? Oh, it does, yeah. You got some? The other areas next. So if you look north of, kind of northeast of that, you can see next, you just see all, whoops, I went backwards. One more, next. So you can see all of these in and out zigzag areas where you literally can get kayaks, paddleboards, and used to be able to get boats through most of that area, but it's become shallower and shallower over time. Next. So everybody knows what the Continental Divide is, right? I grew up in Colorado, so I've literally walked a couple hundred miles of that at some point in my life. But next, obviously, all the water that goes to the east of the Continental Divide ends up in the Gulf, and all the water that goes to the west, left, next, ends up in the Pacific. Next. So as it turns out, if you look at our estuary, we basically have a continental divide as well. And if you know where the on Seagrass Lane, there's a house that looks kind of like an Italian villa, and it's got like a dock that's about a mile long that goes out. Next. And that ends up right there. And if you're on a paddleboard at dead slack tide, you're high tide, dead slack tide, if there was no wind, if you're 100 yards north of that, next, keep going, next, 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 next. So if you're 100 yards north of that line, you're going to drift out into Deweese Inlet. Next. But if you're on the other side of that line, next, all that water, next, keep going, next, 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 this area right here, next, all that, next, all that heads out the marina. So whatever happens from that red line to the left is dependent on how good the water flow is through the marina. Next. So next. So that's kind of the area that we outlined. We're starting at that Continental Divide going to the southwest. Next. And that's the stop plug. When the marina gets plugged up, the rest of that gets plugged up. Next. So there's an area next, just a little bit north of the bridge that last time we dredged, and we dredged to about 10 feet, that area there was about, at low tide, about 4.5 to 5 feet at least, sometimes a little bit better. Next. Now, it's a little bit hard to see on this TV, but at low tide, if I jumped off a paddleboard, I'd probably sprain my ankle. It's literally 6 inches underwater. So we've gone from 6 feet of depth to 6 inches of depth. Next. So the whole thing is to try to get the flow coming in and out of the marina. Next. So we want to keep this area, next, and the area just a little bit further north. Next. One more time. Next. So there's some areas. Jeff used to live on Seagrass Lane, and he could tell you, hit it 3 times. Next, next, next. There's 3 areas there that people used to be able to have boats there that at low tide you can't get through. In fact, if you have a paddleboard, I have a paddleboard, a Hobie Cat paddleboard that or kayak that has paddles underneath, and they're only about 1.5 feet long, but I can't use them in that area. Next. And it's just getting worse over time. Next. So dredging serves 2 purposes. Next, it obviously keeps the marina functional and navigable. That's important to boaters, but more important, it increases the flow of water in and out of the marsh. So even if you had no interest in boats or boating or whatever, but if you have any interest in what happens, whether it's fishing, paddleboarding, kayaking, whatever. So dredging, we have to do it every 7 to 10 years. Next. Last done in 2013. Next, we did the depth to 10 feet, but right now we have some areas that were 10 feet that are now 3. Cost of dredging in 2012 was $65,000 in engineering costs and $1.3 million in dredging. We're anticipating that we're going to do this in 2023, 24. Multiple aspects related to the cost, engineering costs for process and spoil area options, permitting, mobilization of the equipment, and then obviously the actual cost of the dredging itself. Next. So what we're anticipating coming up here is that the engineering is going to be $400,000 to $500,000 because it looks like the Army Corps of Engineers is not going to let anybody use a spoil area anymore. It's going to be a new concept. They've used it successfully in some other areas where basically what they try to do is use high flow velocity areas. So they're thinking that water going in and out of the Deweese Inlet at certain times, they can dredge and maintain a certain amount of material, and as the current reaches a certain speed, then they can release that material. There's potentially a little bit of a sideline benefit to this, that it's not pure sand, but it is sort of sandy, and it's going to end up a mile or half a mile or maybe a little bit more offshore, but probably is going to reduce, if this is the option that gets used, it probably will help reduce at least a little bit some of the erosion. This is a big number, though. I mean, $65,000 a decade ago. Now it's $400,000 to $500,000. We're hoping to share this with Toller's Cove, Waterway Island, Deweese, and Isle of Palms community, and we think that the dredging could be up to $2.5 million for the actual dredging. Next. So what do we hope to accomplish from this? Next. We're hoping to get some support from Isle of Palms. I know that Isle of Palms got $1.5 million from FEMA funds to help maintain this marina. And so we're not talking just about next. We're not talking just about the commercial area and the restaurant area down here. The plug involves next the whole thing. So I think it just behooves us to try to, as good neighbors, just cooperate and try to work on this together, both for our cost savings and just as kind of a matter of principle. Next. We're also trying to get some support from the resort. And unfortunately, and the council, and I'm sure you all know this, they've not been just great partners as of late. And they own, next, one more time. They own about 100 feet of frontage on that seawall there. And on that side, that's 2.2 lots. So we've been sending them bills for their share for maintenance of the marina, because we try to build up a reserve fund for the dredging as well as maintaining the seawall, and they refused to pay it. So we sent them a bill for their 2 shares, because we're building the seawall right now, and I don't want to talk about that much, except just to point out, we just said it's $19,500 what you owe us for your 2 shares for there, and they, again, refused to pay it. So, next. So I got the idea. I talked to some of the Morgan Creek Harbor Association people into agreeing. We had an attorney talk to the resort and say, we're not going to restore the wall on your part then. If you don't want to be part of the Morgan Creek Harbor Association, you can just do it yourselves. It's going to cost $1,200 per foot. So they have 100 feet, it's probably $120,000, plus they'll have to get their own engineering, their own permits, et cetera. Now, all of a sudden, they want to be part of the Wild Dunes Communities or the Morgan Creek Harbor Association, but they've been very, very difficult and uncooperative to work with, even though they have a very scenic spot on there, and that wall is going to fail at some point, and the 16th tee will fall into the marina. Next. We've also gone to the Wild Dunes Community Association to talk to them. Next. And our pitch to them is, they've been building up a reserve fund by taking a percentage of home sales and using that towards the beach renourishment fund, which they have pretty much already maxed out. Now, we know there's a little bit of an unknown about how much that's actually going to cost, but what we're talking about is taking a portion of the excess that they now accumulate of those home sales for homes that are affected by this marsh area and putting that in towards this dredging fund. And, all of us on the backside of the island helped with the beach renourishment, and we're not even asking people on the front to help. We're just saying the people that are affected by this, some of the money that we put into this fund should hopefully come back to us. Next. Almost done here. Next. So everybody's all jazzed up about the front of the island, the beach, and the importance of that. Next. The marina is kind of in the middle of the water. It's kind of between the waterway and the ocean and the marsh. Next. And so we think that the back part of the island is just as important as the front, but the key is the dredging of the marina. If the marina is dredged and it's dredged properly and we can get it deep enough, we'll get a good decade out of having a really healthy marsh area. And it's going to be expensive, and if everybody does it individually, all the engineering costs have to be done individually, the permitting has to be done individually, and so we're just here making a pitch that hopefully when you all get ready to do this, that we can have a conversation and keep us in the loop and do all this together. So I really appreciate you giving me a little bit of time to talk about this. I'm glad to take a few questions. I know you got a lot of other things on your agenda, but appreciate your time.
Just quickly, if there's a quick answer, what can you speak to what causes the plug to occur? Why is sediment occurring there, and what could be preventative measure as opposed to a series of just maintenance issues of dredging?
Yeah, there isn't any preventive thing. Basically, what happens is just the breakdown of all of the plant life in the back that just turns into sludge, and some of it you see is the rack that's spread out everywhere, but a lot of that just disintegrates and it just becomes compost basically. So that it's as simple as that, just dead marine life and both animal and plant life just becomes slush that fills it up.
Didn't used to do that until they dredged the marina back in the seventies and never did develop it, and then Wild Dunes came in. Well, it wasn't even Wild Dunes. Sea
Isle of
Pines.
Palms Beach and Racket Club.
Pines before.
You refer to the Morgan Creek Association, which I'm assuming is homeowners on both sides, there's condos down there. Is the city part of that association because they own waterfront at the city commercial property? Are they part of that same
They're
association?
not a part of, they're not part of the Morgan Creek Harbor Association. They're an independent group.
Gotcha.
So they stop and then we start.
Okay.
So just food for thought. I know this is a project that's probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years off, but I just hope that you all will keep the Morgan Creek Harbor Association in the loop. And I think we can do a lot of cost savings by working together, just because if each one of us does it independently, we're all going to be paying the same engineering fee, we're all going to be paying the same permitting fee, we're all going to be fighting for some place to put the stuff. So anyway.
Well, typically, the city has done the whole process and joined the different associations involved, Dewey's Island, the city, and Morgan Creek, to oversee it, because it's easier for the city to get the permits, I think, than the individuals.
Usually, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I would just add that the city has engaged ATM, Kirby Marshall specifically, to do the bathymetric surveying for, and I do think it's just the marina portion and going out to the intracoastal. And part of his work, and I believe we've already committed to this with ATM, that they would reach out to see who, to Sandy's point, who wanted to piggyback onto that agreement with the city in terms of permitting construction. It's been done several different ways over the years, but the city is always, we do basically carry the brunt of the permitting, and especially in the, right there at the marina proper. So I think some coordination is already contemplated. I never know to what level the city will participate or.
Yeah, one of the rumors that I heard was that the timing wasn't going to work out, that you were going to have to do it at an earlier date than us. I've talked to Mike Loftus, Mike's talked to Mayor Pounds, and a few other people, and that doesn't seem to be the case. I mean, this is not something that there's like 8 months or 2 that you can do it. So anyway.
I would suggest you making contact with Kirby Marshall with ATM and just have that discussion and express your interest in coordinating any which way you can.
Just a sideline, I don't know if y'all know this, the president of ATM is probably the world's most famous marine engineer. He's inspected over 300 marinas all over the world, and the guy knows everything about this one and the one in Dubai that looks like a palm tree and everything in between. It's a very impressive company.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Right. When did we last dredge? The city dredged the front and the approaches. Dewey's wasn't ready to help, as I remember, and Morgan Creek wasn't at a point where they needed it at that time either. Is it 10 years ago?
Seems to me like it's been 5 years ago, but probably has been more like, it's probably more like
More than 5.
It's been 12 years.
We finished
12?
in 2013.
Yeah.
And you all had finished
we had already, so more than 10 years ago.
Yeah, so you had finished almost a year before we had finished, and we finished in 2000.
Okay.
Now, the Morgan Creek Board has also touched base with Deweese and Tollers to partner. So I don't know where Isle of Palms is in this communication. I haven't heard anything about Isle of Palms talking to this group.
So, yeah, I would urge all of them to make contact with Kirby with ATM. He is the point of contact for the city, and they're under contract to begin that bathymetric survey to get, which is the front part of the permitting. So that we've basically started the permitting process. But again, I'm pretty sure our scope with ATM at this point is just the area just immediately adjacent to the marina.
Okay, because I know the board sent a letter out to Desiree about what we're doing from our board. And the biggest problem that we've run into thus far, which is early on, is where you're gonna put the crap. You know, no one wants it anymore.
Right.
So I think if everyone's facing it together, it'd be a lot better than individuals.
Right.
Dave Sykes used to own a spoil area.
The spoil areas aren't, the one on the other side of Goat Island is not available anymore. There's no areas that are available anymore.
I know, but one of the, yeah, anyway.
If you have a connection with it, maybe you can get a lot of debris.
All right. We ready to move on to resiliency? So in your packet is an updated version of the comprehensive plan draft resiliency element. Matt and I met with Suzanne and Stephen, kind of went over the old version that you all had previously seen, talked about some modifications. Matt has made some of those changes. We've kind of gone back, and I think we have another round of comments from Stephen and Suzanne to be incorporated in, but we were at a point where we just wanted to share it with you and see if you all had comments, concerns, or get your input at this point before we went too much further. I have also made contact with the Corps of Engineers about the report that they did, and they have some acronyms for that report, but they have assigned a dollar amount, and Stephen's much better versed in this than I am, but trying to get kind of a breakdown of what they think our vulnerabilities are in terms of resilience. And they have kind of given us a canned answer, but I think we'd like to have them just come talk to us. I don't know that we've gotten to the right person yet, and it probably was a consultant, I'm guessing, so I don't know that there is a perfect person. So, Suzanne, Stephen, anything to add or comments on that?
No, I think, what we talked about and some of the figures and charts you added are good. I think they're an improvement. I think they're much more Isle of Palm specific than talking about the region as a whole or what's going to happen in Charleston or North Charleston, Mount Pleasant. So I think that's on the right track. I think in general, when you look through the Army Corps plan and you looked at their risk model, we didn't score very high on a lot of risk issues, and that's in some ways a good thing. There wasn't a lot of cultural impact or natural resource impact, or since we do beach renourishment already, there wasn't a lot of erosion and sediment. They did calculate some numbers for potential facility and building damage, and they have a model to do that, and you guys played with that, and even when you run that, the numbers don't come out that high. So I think it kind of showed that, in spite of the fact that we're a little barrier island, in the big picture, we're not going to draw a lot of national or regional attention because we have a lot of risk associated with these issues, which is fine, but it doesn't mean it's not important to us. $20 or $50 million worth of damage may not be much to the city of Charleston, but it's a lot to us. So I think that's what we have to take out of this: is what are the issues that we should be focusing on, and it mainly boils down to flooding and structural damage and infrastructure damage. And then taking a step back from that, maybe not even in the comprehensive plan, but in really more of a specific resilience plan, saying, what are the plans? Those should already exist in many cases. Isle of Palms Water and Sewer Commission, Dominion, South Carolina DOT, Charleston Water, all these people should have contingency plans on what's going to happen in the event of whatever the issue is. So I think part of this is pulling that information together. Would be helpful in either in a separate document or seeing that those already exist. I don't think we need that in the comprehensive plan. I think what we've got here is about the right level of effort, showing here's what the issues are going to be, and here's how we're going to address it. The only other thing that kind of jumped out at me was if you really look at what the damage that they keep coming up with, either due to a hurricane or sea level rise, or it really boils to flooding. You know, they're saying the island is prone to flooding. Gee, no surprise. And sea level rise exacerbates that. Hurricanes exacerbate that. So should we be looking at things to minimize that damage in the case of flooding? The one chart we put in here says, you know, over the next 20 years, we could see twice as much parts of the island flooding. Well, that's fine. And I question this, and this is a question, do our building codes help us prevent flooding damage? And I think we've done some things that maybe do and maybe don't. You know, if there are structures that are below flood elevation, are we allowing them to be improved and spend more money on them? Or should we be saying we should be minimizing the amount of money that's spent on structures that are below flood elevation and improving those structures? So I think those are the kind of things from a planning point of view we should be looking at, is are we on the right path to minimizing damage due to future flooding? Suzanne? I know you spent some time
I'm following
looking
with you.
at
I'm not going to repeat what you just said, but I do agree that a more robust plan is needed. And where we're headed now in the contingency plan, or I'm sorry, the comprehensive plan, looks good.
Yeah, that was part of the challenge was to, you know, we have the existing comprehensive plan, which kind of roughly dedicates 2, 3, 4, 5 pages to each element within it with a series of recommendations. I think we wanted to be sure that we didn't kind of put 45 pages in one element. So we're trying to strike that balance
Right.
of fitting into the current document well and at the right kind of level of detail. We've tried to do that. I think, you know, I think that what we have now does a pretty good job of high level, but yeah, I think I think we know that a future plan would be necessary to get to the real nitty gritty of exactly what to do.
I do agree with Stephen, though, in that pulling some of the other utilities and water treatment, what the water treatment plant contingencies are together are important, because one of the things that will directly impact us is, you know, if anything happens to the water treatment facility. And being new and going in, I know they're planning for, the planning phases are already laid out. But, sorry, what happens to them and how we address it? We could probably touch on that in this plan.
So
'Cause there
we
goes
have a
drinking
key
water,
issue in there,
goes-
Right.
work with utility providers to improve resilience of infrastructure.
So we go down without water, what is the plan? You know, we go down without, you know, water treatment, what is our plan?
Well, it'd also be kind of, I think, it's probably kind of nice even in here is even if we had the recovery, projected
Right.
recovery periods.
Right.
So
Those-
whether we
yes.
do something about it or not, knowing how long we're going to be without power,
Mm.
water, whatever. And then make a decision on whether that's worth an investment to reduce that amount of time.
And that's usually analyzed all through these resiliency plans, looking, I call it a SWOT analysis, but it's a strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat. So we're definitely on the right track, we just need more information.
Yeah, so we're,
I had just a couple of comments reading through it.
Great.
On page 34, in the kind of middle of the red section, where it starts off additionally, the SACS future sea level rise. That sentence, I just had a hard time understanding what was. I don't know if y'all were going to reword it or had looked at that.
so that, okay. So I don't know if and it's my understanding of that sentence and that report that there's going to be an additional 2,000 acres. Is that right, Steve?
Well, that- yeah.
That's at risk and kind of I guess when you do the inundation
Right.
mapping, it's showing 2,000 acres.
Well, that was my
But
comment.
I think it could be said more simply than that sentence. The
Well,
sentence
well,
kind of,
the way it read to me was there are 2,000 acres currently at high risk or medium high risk, and then additional 2,000 are half of the current acreage. So it didn't, it just hit me, it didn't
Okay.
come
Yeah.
across the way it was.
that one needs to be cleaned up.
Yeah, we'll,
You're specific with 2,000 acres, and then you're inspecific with the other half.
okay.
What other half?
Which I thought we were only about 4,500 acres total.
We are. It's
So-
about 4,000
so that
acres
would
plus or
say-
minus, right, half the island is at medium to high risk in the future.
Yeah, that's where I was trying to go, is what are you trying to say there? Is it?
And I think the
is it-
sentence could almost just say that. We don't have to get into
Yeah.
the convoluted way of saying it, backdoor. But their model predicts over 2,000 acres will be at medium to high risk of flooding in the future.
And along that note, I think the last paragraph, I'm a little confused about. I don't know if it could be moved to issues and strategies, or if it's just an informational.
The blue in 2022, that paragraph?
Yes, right above key issues on 35. That's what we're in the process of doing?
Right.
Question.
That's correct.
So would that go in under strategies? Because since it's not completed,
I mean, that is, if you think that's better in a strategy, that specifically is 4.2, sealing the back of the island. I think that's more appropriate as a, and I think our goals
Oh.
and strategy numbers need to, so that'd be a strategy 4.2.2.
I think it would look good as a strategy. 4.2.2.
Okay.
So
We
outside-
identify,
oh, sorry. Also had a comment on, it was goal 4.1, that one just hit me, the goal of build dunes and restore beaches as opposed to, I guess, to protect the dunes. I thought that, didn't see as our goal should be to build dunes. It should be more to preserve or protect the dune system maybe, which would include potentially building additional dune areas, but.
So substitute, well, build and protect, because we do occasionally build them.
well, we already have an existing beach monitoring and renourishment program. What we really want to do is, we want to continue, maintain that, continue that program, continue monitoring the beach. That will then tell us what needs to happen. I don't think we need to say, and here what's going to happen, but we spend a lot of money with a lot of consultants telling us, testing the beach every year and telling us what's happening. So I think we want to encourage and continue a strong beach management program.
So is almost the strategy 4.11 the goal? Is to support beach renourishment projects?
But I don't, as identified from the beach management program, which we don't really talk about anywhere, we already have an existing beach management program. So I think, adding those words even to that would be fine.
So an acknowledgement, we have an ongoing beach management program
Right.
and protect, build, restore, renourish as
That's
described by
identified.
that
Yep.
program.
Yep.
Okay. And that would be goal 4.1, correct?
Cool. Yes.
In 4.2.1, that's where the dredging ties in. Right now, there's no volume available in the creeks because it's all full of mud. Once the dredging occurs, that will open up a lot of water space for the backside of the island.
Well,
4.21 just talks about supporting the administering measures that protect marshes on the backside of the island. That's kind of vague.
I think, Stephen, you and I submitted some more. This is not the most updated, is it?
well, we have
thinking-
comments.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, if,
Oh, is this maybe this is an
or
older?
it's got some weird stuff going on.
so,
Definitely
you know,
makes sense.
That's why I'm going back and forth.
That's
saying
I'm trying to make sense of it, and I know what you're saying.
So-
So missing a graph too, because it had both those graphs on
Right.
there.
Yeah.
so
So-
maybe if we can update that and then we can take a look at it by email or at another. I mean, I hate to go through it if it's not.
Well, 4.2 now, in the modified page 36, says seal.
Yeah.
Our
Right.
first goal was 4.2, seal the backside of the island from tidal intrusion. That's where we started. And then started to adjust, so I don't know where.
I think it just didn't print the corrections. It's the most updated version, but
Okay.
Well, we'll continue to, if the group is happy for the four of us to continue to just kind of work on it, that was our goal. I think we knew the strategies and goals were still kind of,
Yeah, let's
A
see if
work
we
in
can get one
progress.
cleaned up with all the edits in it and do one more to get
another
back to this
pass
group, to the whole
in
group. Yeah,
January.
because it's hard with all the changes and edits and comments right now.
But the first several pages I thought were.
Yeah.
were really good.
Yeah, it's getting very, and just so it didn't jump out at me, but this graph has a red line.
I saw, it took me a while, so I thought, oh, we got rid of that, and then I said, oh,
Yeah,
there is a red line
The red
through
line
it.
is actually
Yeah.
deleting that, but
Let's
it's
go in
showing
and,
it,
why don't you just accept all the changes and
Yeah.
start clean again?
so,
Yeah, because it is getting hard to follow. The only other one we don't really expand on, and again, I know I mentioned it in my sidebar comments, I don't know if I actually changed the text, was somewhere we talk about here about encouraging elevating structures or something like that. I think maybe we need to be more specific than that,
That's a
be-
can of
because in
worms.
some ways, we've done just the opposite. We've encouraged keeping low structures. And that's a much bigger picture. That's not just even us, but I mean, council and everyone has to realize if you're gonna leave let a structure stay there below a flood elevation and allow it to be improved 50%, 50%, 50%, 5 times, that's not raising the house. So, I mean, right now, that's what our rules allow.
that's correct.
So we need to wrestle with that.
That's picking your poison.
Yeah.
I know.
We've worked hard to keep those
I know,
low-lying houses
and I
low.
understand there's arguments both ways, but
Yeah.
I think you can't say we want to encourage elevating houses, but then your codes don't encourage that.
I would point out a similar kind of head scratcher that we've been wrestling with, and you will recall the last subdivision we approved was Forest Trail, kind of 3 lots went to 5. And that cul-de-sac goes down to an elevation of, and I think it's 3 or 4 feet, but at a high tide, that
It's flooded.
cul-de-sac goes well underwater. Our current codes only allow an owner to elevate their lot 1 foot above the road. So our codes required those brand-new properties, brand-new lots to be down at like 4 feet above sea level. So we've actually brought that up, with the Davis and Floyd group who is doing, they're looking at our development standards. I know that the intention to keeping somebody from elevating their lot was concern over the neighbors and running the water towards their neighbor, but right now we might not have the correct balance in terms of ensuring that we have resilient neighborhood going forward if we're requiring them to build so
And we
low.
don't need to necessarily have the answer here, but we probably should identify that take a look at existing codes that
Right.
that are not resilient friendly, so to speak, that need to be revisited in order, looking at long-term resilience.
Right.
And we just mentioned 2, there may be some others.
It's a good, to Ron's point, that both of those, we kind of picked our poison. Neither one is
Yeah.
perfect, and
Because we've had discussions about the flood insurance rates
Yep.
and the flow chart of things you can get credit for. And there wasn't a whole lot of credit to,
It was
discourage that.
it was the 5-year tracking that we did away with, which is
Right.
what Steven's referencing, which allows somebody to do 49%, 49%, 49%. Used to track that over 5 years. So maybe we went, maybe we just went too far on the side of,
but on the other side of that, I mean, that just takes then will and patience if you wanted to restore your non-compliant grade level house. But also 10 years ago, most of our conversations in the planning commission had to do with the size of all the new homes.
Yeah.
Because they're elevated. They could be a 2,500 square foot house, but you put it 9 feet in the air, it's gonna feel a whole lot
Yep.
bigger. And then the sociological effect of living in a raised house. For those of you who still live at grade, God bless you. The rest of us don't know what our yard looks like anymore. Certainly mine. I don't want to see what my yard looks like. Because you quite literally psychologically separate. You're living in your raised house with your raised porch and your raised pool if you can afford it.
Yeah,
Buy on the ridge along Cameron Boulevard, you don't have.
There
any
you go.
problem.
that's right.
right?
So I think just identifying that we should be looking at
Yep.
codes and how they affect resilience. Because I agree, there's arguments on both sides.
And there's flood-resistant construction that doesn't mean you have to be on stilts.
Correct.
So I would hope, and I'm sure,
Noah's
that
Ark, perfect example.
I'm sure the facility on Forest Trails, I think they call it, sewer
Right.
building is flood resistant, even though there's no area for elevation for the floodwaters to flow underneath. Thing's a concrete shit house.
There's a few houses like that out here too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think if
You got something on all
understand,
of that?
yeah, I think that we're understanding. We'll continue to work, clean it up, bring another iteration at your January meeting,
Yeah.
and I think that's perfect.
Cool.
Do you have any new business? No new
Nope.
business? Any other miscellaneous business? Goodnesses.
Motion to adjourn.
I know, right?
Motion. Got a
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Discussion?
Oh, no discussion.
Off record at 5:32.
Too late.